To get this legislation before the General Conference has been and will continue to be a little bit of fun. One is that they missed the September 18th deadline. This came out on January 3rd of this year, and all legislation needed to be in by September 18th of 2019. So there is a place in the discipline where an annual conference can submit legislation up to 45 days before the start of General Conference. So an annual conference can get together and decide to submit legislation up to 45 days before. And that's what likely will happen, and it actually has happened in 2 cases. The Philippines Annual Conference, Cavite, has already sent the legislation to the General Conference from their annual conference. We expect that the Michigan Annual Conference and Sierra Leone will meet and talk about that and think about that. They also send it forward to General Conference. And then the Liberian Annual Conference sent it forward, but it sent it forward with lots of edits. Really changed it a lot. And one of the things, this was a compromise. And so to change it drastically means what? It dissolves. Sadly, it dissolves. So it's coming forward from the Liberians as drastically changed, but we'll consider it. They can't take it back now that they've sent it to us, so we'll just see what happens. Does that make sense? So the remaining questions are this. To which legislative committee will it go? General Conference divides up into legislative committees, and we work through the 1,000+ petitions that have been sent into the General Conference, and we act on those, and then we meet in plenary in order to have the reports of the committees. So it's a way that we can handle all of that legislation. And so will it go to one particular committee, or will it be divided up into multiple committees? That's the Commission on the General Conference's decision, but we just don't know yet into which committee, and I don't think we'll know until we get to General Conference, is my understanding. And when will it be considered? There is a group of people, and the folks, the mediation team, are really hoping that we consider this first, so that then we can move aside all of the other plans, and we can move forward. But again, that's not their decision. The Commission on the General Conference would decide when it's heard, and there's a group meeting to decide the best way for that to happen. But those are still unknowns, and then it has to, be brought up on the floor to do that. One of the things I want us to think about is it's entitled The Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation. Kind of seems like opposites, doesn't it? Some of the news media talked about the United Methodist Church having a divorce, and sometimes it feels that way. But I want us to think about the word reconciliation. First, remembering from Scripture that all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ, and it has given us the ministry of reconciliation. If this is the only way that we can live together and be witnesses of Christ with each other, then perhaps we need to think about that, at least for right now. If this is the only way we can be kind to each other and stop tearing each other apart, then maybe this is a possibility. And so some different definitions of reconciliation I think are important. First is the restoration of friendly relationships, like what I said. The end of estrangement. Certainly we're feeling that in the United Methodist Church. And reconciliation is an outcome, is an improvement on the relations among parties formerly at odds with each other. And we still disagree, but it hopefully would take us a step towards that in moving forward. Okay, so as a part of all of this, there's a couple other pieces of legislation coming before the General Conference that I just wanted to share with you about. And the first one talks about a U.S. regional conference, the United States Regional Conference. Now, early on, I talked about central conferences being outside the United States, and they're composed of groups of annual conferences. And one of the neat things about central conferences, as our churches have expanded, we started as being very U.S.-centric here in the U.S., but we've expanded to be worldwide. And I think that's something to celebrate. It's really exciting. But as we've done this, we also know that there are places as we've expanded as United Methodists that can't do everything that the United Methodist Church could do. They just don't have the infrastructure. So one of the parts, as central conferences were established, is that there were parts of their polity, parts of the way they operated, that they were allowed to change or do differently. And what's interesting is the United States has never been allowed to do that. But the central conferences, speaking to their context, there's no way that they could have a board-of-ordained ministry meeting like we do. They just got, bishops look very differently in those particular areas. And so they're given the opportunity to contextualize that. And so what the U.S. Regional Conference would do would be give the United States an opportunity to contextualize some of the things that we do. But even more than that, what it would do would be, first it would be comprised of all 5 of our jurisdictions. So it would include the whole United States. So all of the jurisdictions would become part of the U.S. Regional Conference. Now, why didn't we choose the word connectional conference so that we were like the rest of the world? Anybody have an idea? Well, back before some of you all were born, the United Methodist Church had a central jurisdiction into which all our African American brothers and sisters were a part of. And it wasn't until 1968 that changed. And so there's a lot of hurt and a lot of harm that was done. So the connectional table, which is kind of like the administrative council for the whole church, they chose the name regional conferences in order to move away from that pain and that hurt of the central jurisdiction. And so it wouldn't be a reminder of the racism of our past. Currently, most all petitions have to deal with us. They just have to deal with how we do our pensions, what the general agencies do. I mean, most of them are U.S.-centric. They just deal with the U.S. And so our brothers and sisters from across the world get to come and vote on that and listen to that, and it doesn't affect them. And so one of the thoughts would be then if a regional conference was brought together, that we could then deal with the petitions that dealt with just the United States. And then as we came together as a general conference, it would be more inspirational, and there would be sermons, and we talk about what we were doing well together and how we could support each other and support the growth of United Methodism, but we wouldn't have to sit through, I would say probably 800 to 900 of the petitions deal with just the United States. And so we're bringing people in from all over the world for 2 weeks for something that just really has to do with us. So that's one of the possibilities. It also would allow us to have parity, have some, be able to operate the same way that the churches outside of the United States, the central conferences, can operate. So as we have a different context here in the United States, then we could also make some changes. Now, one of the questions always is, so does that mean that this is to help the United Methodist Church here in the U.S. make a change in the language about homosexuality? Probably not right now, because the only parts that we can change are the parts that aren't a part of a global discipline that we have. And the global discipline can't be changed. It has our articles of religion, it has our confessions of faith, and right now it has our social principles. So central conferences can't change everything, and if we voted on this, we couldn't change everything. There would still be things that we held to all as United Methodists. Yes?
Is this the proposal that Jeremy Troxler put forward at our annual conference, or is it just similar to it?
It's similar. It's similar. Yeah, Jeremy was more trying to bring things down into the annual conference level, but it's similar, and it again allows us to deal with that. Okay. It wouldn't change the role or authority of our jurisdictions. They would remain the same. We'd still be a part of the Southeast jurisdiction. There would just be kind of another level that would allow us to meet together and do the business of the U.S. United Methodist Church. those things that we need to spend some time doing if we pass this. We need to talk about how to turn around being a dying denomination. You know, our brothers and sisters across the world are growing like crazy, but we are not. And so I think that's something important that we need to think about.
Amy?
Yes.
So are you saying that the language of the discipline cannot be changed until the earliest general conference in 2024?
Unless there was a special called general conference. There would have to be another, unless, legislation is interesting. So I don't know if something would happen at this general conference, but I don't think it can. I'll be surprised. But it's one of those unknowns out there. So, but this is what we're expecting. Yes?
What about churches in the Americas, but not the United States, that aren't part of a central conference already, like in South America? Is there any talk about where they fall in?
So Methodist churches are United Methodist.
United Methodist?
So they could join one of, they could be a part of ours, or they could just continue out where they were. Yeah, they could make their own decision. They might not want to deal with all our stuff too. Probably not. Other questions about that? Then there is one other piece of legislation, and we haven't actually seen the exact legislation, but it's called the Christmas Covenant. It was brought to us by our brothers and sisters, United Methodists in the Philippines and in Africa. And they got together, and one of the things that they said is they didn't really want to see a split, but they wanted to weave together in a God. And that's a hallmark. And then Ubuntu. And we know that means I am who I am because of who you are. We need to be in community together in order to do that. And then the last one, how can I practice this? Bayanai Ihan is a Filipino concept of community spirit and cooperation to achieve community goals. And so the Christmas Covenant, as it's being called, was to bring all those together, to remember the unity, to remember that we need each other to be in unity with one another, that we want to have a community spirit in order to get the ministry done. And so they asked that we remember that we have connectional roots rooted in mission. That we're a connectional church because we get more done together than any local church could do separately. And that's really important. And it's particularly important for our brothers and sisters outside the United States who need our support and our help and are working alongside of them so that they can continue to grow. It also talks about the respect for contextual ministries. In fact, the Christmas Covenant talks about maybe labeling all the conferences regional conferences. And so changing the central conference name to regional conferences, and that's what we have all over the world. And what they say is doing otherwise fosters relationships that are essentially colonial. You know, that we think we know better than them, but we've got to respect each other's context and do that. And it gives legislative equity again. It allows regions to do the same things as we've grown to be worldwide. I think early on when we developed our discipline, we didn't know we were going to be a worldwide denomination. Now, we should have, because Jesus told us to go into all the world. But so we kind of pieced this together, and I think we have an opportunity now to say, whoa, you know, we can't just be the U.S. and then allowing all these people to be around us. They're actually going to be bigger than the United States population of United Methodism. So it's an opportunity for us to rethink it and to give some parity, some equity, to not think that we in the United States know what's best, but to listen to all our brothers and sisters across the world, because they have a lot to teach us. Then there's a little bit more legislation. See, we're not just going to do the protocol, and we're not just going to do the 12 plans, and we're not just going to do those plus the regional conference and the Christmas Covenant, but there's some other things coming up that I just want you to know about, because we were really focused in February on one item, but this is a regular general conference, which means there are lots of stuff coming before it. So a couple of those things are this. First is our revision of our social principles. If our social principles are going to be worldwide, they needed to be revised. So they've tried to shorten them, they've tried to make them simpler, and they've tried to include those things which apply to all of us as a worldwide denomination. You can look at those. You can go to umc.org, and go to social principles and you can read those. And see what they are, but it is a reduction. It went through, I think, 16 writing processes as they wrote and took it out among people all over the world and came back and rewrote. So they've been working hard on this. The second is a study of ministry that is taking a look at our theological understanding of ministry, of the ministry of the laity and the ministry of the clergy, of what it means to be an elder and what it means to be a deacon, what it means to be a local pastor. There's not going to be anything that's voted on at this general conference, but they are asking that they can move forward so that it could be voted on in 2024. So it's a work in progress. And as I said, that's the speed of Methodism. Okay? We do that tons. We have a study committee, they report back and say, we need a little more time, and so we'll give them 4 more years. Then there are going to be some pension changes from Westpac that are going to be voted on. One of the things as our denomination shrinks, and particularly here in the U.S., that we've realized is that our pension program has had a defined benefit component so that there was some equity in the pension. And we just, as a denomination, can't sustain that. That's why there's pension liabilities to churches who choose to leave and become independent. And so they're going to, Westpac, which is our pension board, is going to propose that we eliminate the defined benefit and just move towards folks contributing as a percentage of their salary, and churches in the denomination doing the same thing to make it more affordable. And those of you in business know that lots of people have done this. We've just held on to this for a little while. Questions about those 3 things?